Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the Potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. We got a lot to discuss. We got Bengals, we got Hard Knocks, we got college basketball, ick at the moment. We got college football with the conference championship games. Also, so much more. Yeah, also ick at the moment, yes. And of course, my favorite portion of the podcast, you can ask me a question on any topic. If you go to the Xverse, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything. It does not have to be a sports-related topic. It can be on anything, and I'll do my best to answer it. Rick, you're just freshly back from Akron, where NKU took it on the chin. You look well-rested for a guy that got in the wee hours of the morning. Did you get a good night's sleep, I'm assuming?
No, not really. We had a little snafu with the kid this morning, so I was up and at him early around 7. But that's neither here nor there, Skinny. I'm more interested in the fact that you mentioned Hard Knocks. Did you watch the first episode of Hard Knocks?
So last night, Kelsey Conway and I went to the Mike Petraglia estate to watch the Villanova UC game. She's a UC grad. Mike's a Villanova grad. Had some pizza and wings and beer. And I wasn't planning on staying. And then I realized, actually, Kelsey said she goes, I said, I think I'm going to leave. She goes, you're not going to stay for Hard Knocks? I go, okay, I'll stay here and watch it. So we watched that. I don't know if I'm going to watch many more, but I watched it.
Yeah, that surprised me because last time we had talked about this, you were completely uninterested. But first of all, it sounds like a great night of watching college hoops and hanging out with a few of your fellow beat writers. But okay, here's my initial thought. I watched the first episode, and everyone acts like every time a new episode of Hard Knocks come out, Scorsese just released his best film ever. And
they do a nice job. I will say they do a nice job.
They do a nice job, but I was pretty underwhelmed with this episode. I didn't think it was that interesting or compelling. I mean, it's always well shot, but I mean, there's not that much going on. It's just like a week of preparation before a game for all these teams. I didn't think there was anything that was too earth-shattering or insightful or interesting about watching this. I did think they really underline some stereotypes that I think fan bases have formed, or at least maybe I have formed. First being, Mike Tomlin is awesome. I mean, he came across as very awesome, and it felt like they went out of their way to show you how cool and authoritative he is.
He was the star of the show.
Definitely. Russell Wilson is corny, and they even showed moments of the huddle where, like, one of his teammates was making fun of him. I love when you're about to tell us the play, and then you go into a motivational speech instead, and they were, like, ragging on him. That was awesome. That was a great part of this show because that's what everyone nationally thinks about Russell Wilson. And then you get to the Bengals, and Skinny, I have to tell you, I just kind of I've always had this thought about Zach Taylor, and it was just reemphasized watching this. He gives you that Andy Dalton quality where you feel he's trying his hardest. He's doing everything right. He's saying all the right things. There's nothing really wrong with what he's doing, but there's just something about him that makes it hard to buy in.
Well, I think the problem right now is the message has gotten stale. I think he believes in the message very much.
But just the sound of him, right? Like the way he comes off.
Yeah, and we talked about that amongst ourselves. I actually just did a segment with Tony Pike on Cincy 360, and that kind of got brought up. And I said, and Austin Elmore, his co-host and producer, I heard his take earlier before I came on about that, and I kind of had the same thing. You just are what you are personality-wise, and you just have to be true to yourself. I mean, I don't need Mike Tomlin to be Tony Dungy. But, let's not forget, John Wooden won a lot of national championships not raising his voice very much. Now, granted, he had some pretty doggone good players to do that with. Tony Dungy won a Super Bowl being very soft-spoken. But at the same time, I don't expect Dan Hurley to suddenly flip his personality from madman to, I'm just going to be quiet on the side. It's just, it doesn't, you have to be true to yourself. And I just think that's what Zach is. I think he's a decent person. Who's not going to be fire and brimstone coach. Not every coach. I know that's what fans want out of every coach, right? They want fire and brimstone coach. That's what they want. These guys aren't trying hard enough. They don't have passion. They fell flat. It's all a bunch of hogwash. But yeah, I said on the interview today, I said Mike Tomlin came up with what we thought Mike Tomlin's like. John Harbaugh came up with what we thought John Harbaugh's like, and then Kevin Stefanski and Zach Taylor came off as guys grasping at straws with their team struggling.
Yeah, and I didn't even think of it so much as like, oh, the Bengals are struggling and Zach Taylor doesn't know what he's doing or anything like that. It had nothing to do with the actual content of what he's saying. It's just that Andy Dalton clip that we always bring up where he's leading the team out of the tunnel there and he's giving his pregame speech like, all right, we fought hard all week, guys. Oh, go out, play hard, 3, ready, 1, 2, 3, play hard. Everyone's like, okay, play hard.
We got you. Yep.
Thanks, Andy. That's kind of like the vibe of Zach Taylor. It's like the things he's saying sound like the things all the other coaches are saying. And he's doing it in a way that seems authentic to him. It doesn't seem like he's trying too hard or trying to be something he's not. And yet, I don't know if it's just the way his voice sounds, the way he comes off, or what. there's something about it that doesn't quite have that oomph of another guy. And Mike Tomlin is hard to compare him to like this on the show because Mike Tomlin really has that presence. Obviously, he has that cool factor to him. But I'm with you. You don't have to have that. You don't have to be a certain type of personality to be successful. But I also think just watching this, it's definitely striking watching the difference.
There's no question
in who Zach is.
Yeah, there's no question. That part, I knew that was going to be talked about among fans today. Because, again, every fan wants fire and brimstone guy. Coming in there, gritting your teeth, get him to run through a wall for you, running out to practice. That's not how he is. He's a very clinical coach that I think is big on the preparation aspect of it and not the fire and brimstone aspect of it.
But that's what's cool about Mike Tomlin, though, right? Because he's not really a fire and brimstone guy, I wouldn't say. I don't see him out there ranting and raving and hollering and getting his guys' faces. He seems more like a player coach.
Yeah.
But when he says the authoritative things, they seem real. They carry some weight.
You know what scene cracked me up the most? I don't know why it did.
Cheetos? The free?
Absolutely.
Did they do that scene?
I don't know.
Eating too much? What was that?
That's funny you guessed that because I'm like, oh, he's eating like a bag of barbecue Fritos. Fritos, yes. With his feet up on the desk watching film. I'm like, that was actually, I don't know why I love that scene, but I love that scene, but it was also weird.
Whoever was editing that is just like you and me. They saw that footage and they go, I just love that. I don't know why, but I have to put that in. It was a gratuitous shot. It was like, some of these shots are quick little snippets. And this shot they stick on for 12 seconds of him unwrapping opening up the bag of Fritos, sticking his hand in it, the ruffle of it, and then him propping his feet up and taking a bite of them. Of 12 seconds spent on that. It was hilarious. I had no idea why they put that in.
And then the other one was the Jameis Winston having to repeat the play call and then, mimic that he was going up to the line of scrimmage to call it. And then in his bare feet, taking his drop back.
Do you think that's a common theme that all quarterbacks do throughout the week? Or is that like a specific to Cleveland and Jameis thing right now?
No, I think it's just repeating play calls just to make everyone have it. Yeah.
But I saw people tweeting about that, like as if Jameis was having to do that because he's Jameis or something. I'm like, that feels like a pretty standard thing you would do throughout the week is just get comfortable with, hey, here's the play call. You got to recite it all. And then remember muscle memory. Here's what I'm going to do when I make that play call.
Yeah, the Bengals used to have a kind of a Jeopardy game that they would play with the quarterbacks.
I remember that.
And they would kind of play it as a game to recite the plays back. It's just to make sure that, when a play call goes in your helmet, you're not going, what did he just say to me? And what do I got to spit back out? It's routine.
Yeah. I also love that moment, the first play of that Bengals Steelers game where the pass gets picked off. And he puts his arm around his receiver and he's just like, hey, that's not going to define this game. Because you saw it on the broadcast. You're going, I wonder what that conversation is right now. And then you get to hear what it really was like. And it's like, man, it also like that guy.
Yeah, it also shows you, because of course he called out George Pickens after the game. It also showed you that he knows how fragile that dude's ego is. Oh my word! I mean, you could see it right in that moment. That
like, the rest of the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a good scene. I thought, again, Mike Tomlin was the star. That was probably the most fun part, was just kind of watching him interact with this guy, some of the little sayings that he used. Was there anything else that stuck out to you from a Bengals perspective?
No, Jonah Williams didn't come off as looking very good in the film that they flipped back to.
That was a hilarious moment too.
Dude, so when we're watching it, as soon as he kind of mentioned that, literally right as it's getting ready to go from the talking to where you see the clip, I go, oh no, Jonah. And there he was. I'm like, oh gosh, I remember this. This is not going to end well. This is not going to go well.
Essentially, this was the Steelers preparing their guys for the matchup against Orlando Brown Jr. And they prefaced it by saying, here's why they have Orlando Brown Jr. And they showed the clips of Jonah just getting worked over in that game.
Yeah, and you could also see, and I know it was, I mean, I even asked a question about it on Monday. I mean, there was no question as that game went on, Orlando was just hurting. And you could see that the Herbig kid took full advantage of it. I mean, he couldn't even get out of his stance.
Yeah. And they were calling that one from the sideline. It's like someone saying it as it happens. And there are some fun moments from those Hard Knocks things from the games where you're able to see like, oh, I watched this on TV.
Right.
Now I get kind of a sideline angle of what was being said during that. That's probably my favorite parts of these. But other than that, I thought they were really cool when they first started to come out. The first couple seasons I saw Hard Knocks. Now at this point, I got to be honest, it feels like a lot of repetition. It feels like the same thing over and over, and people get so excited for it.
Yeah, I'm glad I watched the first episode. Like I said, I mean, I can imagine that from here on out, it's going to be very Baltimore and Pittsburgh centric as it should be. I mean, they're the two teams that are left in the playoff race. I mean, I'm sure they'll gratuitously show a little Bengals here and there, and so I don't need to watch.
Yep. All right, let's switch gears back to the Bengals here. And I guess, how much, Skinny, does the rest of this season matter in terms of the decisions they might make as it relates to players, as it relates to personnel, coaching staff? What are we watching for right now? Does it matter the record they finish with? If they do well, is that going to save some people's jobs, so to speak? Or
Well, and that's always a fear, right? I mean, Tyler Boyd catching a touchdown pass in Baltimore the one year basically gave Marvin Lewis another year. And it was like, that felt like that was going to be the end of it. And instead they get a miracle finish and they bring him back another year. So I would hope that decisions that you're going to make are not going to be based on if this team wins its final 5 games, unless those final 5 games get into the playoffs. I do think I don't think you make sweeping personnel changes until you're mathematically eliminated. This question came up. Tony asked me kind of something similar. But, what do you do with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in week 16 or week 17 or week 18 when you're mathematically eliminated? Are you really going to run the risk of running Joe Burrow out with the guaranteed money there that he suffers maybe an injury that carries into next season in a meaningless game? I think you have to make those tough decisions. I think, once you're mathematically eliminated, throw all the kids out there that you can throw out. Let's see what you got. See who can play and who can't. As you know, Rick, I'm sure you've seen this as a reporter, as an analyst who goes to basketball practices, as somebody that in high school, played stuff. There are some guys that, right or wrong, aren't good practice players that are great in games, and vice versa. There's guys who are great practice players who are terrible in games. I mean, maybe you need to see some of that down the stretch. And so I think those are the things you have to do. Again, but I don't think you do anything until you're mathematically eliminated. And that's probably the fair thing to do.
yeah, and I mean, I don't think you're expecting any type of big changes during the season at all, are you? Do you think they will? Is so drastic as to like fire a coach or something during the season?
No, I mean, honestly, for those that want Lou fired, and I'm not in that camp, but those that want it, if there was a line of them drawing a line in the sand, it might have been this past game against Pittsburgh. But I think you're so late into it that you're going to let it play all out and sit down and make a full evaluation. I just don't know. At this point of firing, what does it really serve? I mean, it's not something that you're going to go, hey, we're only a game or two out of this, and if we can just make this little change here, we're going to get back into it.
Right.
No, you're either completely dissatisfied with somebody, as Chicago should be with Matt Eberflus for the buffoonery on Thanksgiving Day, and obviously the stuff that piled up before that was like the final straw. But I just don't see anything like that taking place until the season's ends.
I'm with you on that. I can't see it, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I would say I want them to make the decision now. I want them to have the decision, their minds made up on certain guys, whether that's keeping them or getting rid of them or what have you, building around certain guys. All of that stuff needs to be made up now when they've played these games that matter. I don't want them to be like the next 5 games are going to decide who sticks around or not, because we've seen that already. Once the season's over and it doesn't really matter and the games are meaningless, it doesn't matter what you do at that point, really. These next few games are mostly meaningless in terms of the Bengals competing or basing what you should do in the future around that stuff. I don't want them to, I mean, I know I'm basically saying the rest of the season is a lame duck season, but that's what I want it to be. I don't want them to be making decisions based on these last several games. And on the point you made about potentially sitting out a guy like a Joe Burrow or a Jamar Chase late in the year, I would say definitely. I mean, you get to week 16, week 17, it's not a hard choice from the Bengals at all. You definitely want to sit those guys. But on the flip side, I guess my other question for you is, how much do players care about playing for stats? Because I think a lot of people...
Well, that's what it would come down to.
Yeah, these guys are all going to want to sit out now for the rest of the season. But I would argue that, for a lot of these guys, still their legacy, the records they're chasing, their future contracts are all based off of the stats they're putting up. So they might not want to sit out.
Oh, I don't think if stats related or not, I don't think Joe Burrow's a guy that would want to sit out no matter what it was. But right now he leads the NFL in completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns. I mean, you could argue those things matter, but I hate to say it that you have to look at through a different prism if you're management and the coaching staff of, we're paying you guaranteed money. If you suffer a catastrophic injury, we're on the hook for that guaranteed money. These are meaningless games. We don't play you in meaningless games in August because we want you to get to the season healthy. Well, guess what now? I want you to get to next season healthy. And so I'm not running this risk factor. I'm just not going to do it. The risk reward is not there. And I'm sorry if it cost you a passing title. You're already paid like you've won 1 billion passing titles. So you just have to live with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation because I keep hearing it from the other side of like, are the Bengals players, is the Bengals management and coaches going to be able to keep the players on the field? Are they going to start making quote unquote business
And
decisions
some might.
sitting out?
And some might.
Well, they might, but that wouldn't be my real concern. My bigger concern would be, because if they sit out, who cares? The Bengals are already out of it. It doesn't matter. But from a fan's perspective, my bigger concern is that, maybe Joe Burrow does play the rest of the season because he wants to chase these passing titles and the numbers that he's putting up. And I wouldn't blame him. He's having an incredible season. But to your point, then you potentially run the risk of letting Joe Burrow take more hits and get injured before next season and potentially set you back for next year. So I think that's something somewhat interesting to watch as we go forward in a season where I don't think there's much interesting left to watch. Personally,
There's not.
This is going to be tough to get through these final several weeks, especially doing a podcast about them. The fan base is certain that they're moving on from someone, whether it's Zach Taylor, whether it's Lou Anarumo, whether it's blowing the whole thing up and just restarting from ground zero. How certain are you that a major decision will be made?
Not at the Zach Taylor level, and I don't even think at the Lou level, to be honest with you. I think it's a position coach or two that likely is the sacrificial lamb. I mean, I think the full nuclear option would be them relieving Lou of his duties and getting another voice. And maybe it's time for another voice. All I can tell you is this. I wrote a column today that kind of touched on this. Do this exercise, Rick. Just do this little exercise for me. Give me a list of players on the defensive unit heading into next year that you'd like to be on this roster to build around.
I mean, Trey Hendrickson is one. I mean, is there another one that you would even say?
I'd bring Logan Wilson back because he's still a very serviceable player.
Fine, but he fell off the map in a hard way this year.
I mean, the young tackles because they're young. I still
there's
think
a player in the secondary that I would keep.
Yeah, I mean, the only one I'm looking at would be Dax Hill coming back off of injury and determine where you want to put him position wise. And I still think Cam Taylor-Britt's going to be a good corner. He just needs to wash this season out of his memory bank. But again, if I'm making a list of bringing guys back definitively, he's not definitive. I mean, he's going to be back because he's under a rookie contract and you got to fill a roster out.
But none of these guys are building blocks.
That goes back to the point of, again, you can point the finger at Lou. That's fine. And he took responsibility on Monday. He pointed the finger inward. He said, it's up to me to get the most out of these guys. And I give him credit for that. I mean, some coaches roll guys under buses. I give him and Zach credit. They both pointed the finger inward at themselves. And I think it's admirable. But at the same time, if you think he's the problem, then is this new guy, whoever comes in, if he's got those same building blocks, how do you think that guy's going to do?
Yeah, and I that's why, as we've talked about this, I continuously go back to Duke Tobin first and foremost. If you're going to stand pat with everything, then fair enough. That is what it is. But if you're going to start making major changes, I think you got to start with the guy who's bringing in the players who's most responsible for that. And as far as I know, that's Duke Tobin. Maybe there's some other stuff going on that I don't know about, and someone else should be held more responsible for some of these player personnel decisions than Duke Tobin. But he's the front-facing figure right now as far as it comes to the GM role or putting this roster together. So I would start with him personally because I don't think Lou Anarumo had a capable defense to work with this year. Now, that doesn't mean you can't also look in a new direction.
Sure.
With the defensive coordinator, maybe just decide we want a whole new direction with this. That would also be fine with me based on the way things went.
Yeah, I understand that.
Start with personnel.
I agree with that. And I think that's exactly right. And yeah, to your point, maybe it is time for a new voice, a new direction, a new style, for lack of a better term. I mean, maybe a more aggressive defensive coordinator is what you need. Maybe a less aggressive defensive coordinator is what you need. Maybe a guy who, I brought this up on the interview today. And I asked Lou about the end play, the Josh Fields run at the end of the game. I said, I'm guessing you guys rep that a bunch during the week. How does that happen? How does nobody have outside contain there? And he said, just a young guy, meaning Josh Newton, just trying to make a play. And he goes, I have full faith next time he'll make the right play. And he said, him and Jordan Battle are supposed to have outside contain, and they just both tried to make a play. Well, is that a coaching issue? If you rep it that many times and you've told them when Justin Fields comes in the game, one of two things is happening. He's going to hand it off on the read option, or he's going to pull it and run. You guys who have outside contain, you know what you're supposed to do. You guys on the inside have your responsibilities. Play your assignment football. And when the main two guys on the outside don't play their assignment, whose fault is that?
I'm totally with you that the players have to show up. The players have to make the plays. But at a certain point, as the coach, you are also just held responsible for the end product. And if continuously your guys just will not execute the game plan that they're giving them, then that is also on you, even if it's not fair. And it might be just that you don't have good enough personnel. But at that point, I think everything just needs to be worked over. And again, I'm not saying that's the situation the Bengals are in. I truly don't know. It certainly looks that way right now. Right now, it looks like everything should be blown up and they should do something completely different defensively. But to your point originally, I still go back to this defense never really had a chance when you look at the personnel. I mean,
Correct.
You know, my buddy Dan made a good point. He was texting me about the Lou Anarumo talking to you guys, and he said, Anarumo saying it begins and ends with me, and then in the next breath saying, you know, he was taking up for Geno Stone essentially and his missed tackles. That's the behavior of a guy who's not worried about losing his job, quite frankly. It seems like a guy who's pretty confident that he's going to be back. So, yeah, I don't get the sense that they're moving on from Lou Anarumo.
Yeah, I think that's the highest it would go. For those that are maybe wanting and wishing Zach to be gone, I don't see you moving on from a coach 2 years after you go to a run of AFC Championship Super Bowl. You can argue that
especially with the Bengals. Especially with the
right. That's right. That's an even better point.
Yeah, there are other franchises who would look at that and say, okay, we got to move on. We got to do better than this. But the Bengals, I don't think feel that way. And honestly, I don't know that they should feel that way. I know it sucks to say that. I know fans don't want to hear it. We all think they should be in the Super Bowl next year, and they're capable of that because they had a couple of good years or whatever, and Joe Burrow is their quarterback. But the reality is this franchise has absolutely sucked my entire life, aside from a few years that Zach Taylor was the head coach. So I don't really know that you can go out there and say, yeah, they're definitely going to do better if they get rid of Zach Taylor.
Ryan Day.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Oh, I know we are.
Going back, actually, Dan asked this question. It was asking you anything, but we're kind of talking about all this stuff right now. So let's address it. Did Zach Taylor ever actually create a quote unquote good culture in the Bengals locker room? Or was the team just really successful with charismatic locker room leaders for 2 years? I realize he contributed to that.
I do, because I do and I don't. I think he knew who the leaders were to identify. And unfortunately, 3 of those guys, 2 of whom played on some crappy teams, but 3 guys in particular, I think really held the locker room together in bad times. Tyler Boyd, DJ Reader, Jesse Bates. I believe those 3 guys. And I know everybody's making a big deal of, DJ had a sack on Thanksgiving Day. DJ hasn't played all that great in Detroit. He's played some, and again, I don't think they thought he was going to be healthy enough to pay him. And you have to understand some of that goes into it. It can't just be, DJ Reader. You didn't know DJ Reader was going to be the DJ Reader he was, because he's really not. But that said, I think you've lost some stuff with that. And, right now, the cores of the locker room where you would look for leaders, I don't see a ton of them. I know Jermaine Pratt's a captain, but he didn't exactly take full responsibility for the buffoonery that took place in tackling on Sunday, did he? I mean, shouldn't a leader there go, we got to be better? We not say what missed tackles. It was screen game, quick game. I mean, it was one of
the. Like there was no issues there, especially when he was personally responsible for a lot of them.
And that's one of your captains.
That would tell me that guy's got to go immediately. And then, quite honestly, he's been so inconsistent throughout his entire career. It's done with him anyway.
I think Mon Bell's very much a leader, but it's hard to be a leader then when you get benched, right? And it's time
good.
It was time to bench him. I thought Ted Karras was a leader on the offensive line, and I think he's actually put a little division in that locker room with this whole take it outside nonsense. Where on Monday, a couple of cluster interviews with multiple reporters were done in the locker room. In fact, he got up at one point, because I was watching one of the interviews with somebody I didn't need to talk to, and he shook his head in disgust and went back to his locker, grabbed his stuff, and left. I'm like, dude, are you really worried about that? When you're 4-8, my guy?
Wait, so what's his issue? He wants interviews to be done outside?
Oh yeah, I bet you've heard about all this.
No, I'm unaware of Ted Karras.
Yeah, this is an NFL PA thing.
I was only aware he was selling hats.
No,
that's all he did.
No, teams are trying to get the media to be out of the locker room, and so this was one of their early initiatives of when you go up to interview a player, it's up to them to tell you they want to go outside. But kind of there was a push in the Bengals locker room of do it, and little by little, more and more veterans are just saying, "To hell with this! I'm just going to stay in my locker and talk to you guys." The one day about a month ago, I walked up to Evan McPherson and I said, "Hey man, you got a second?" This is before his most recent issues. This was when he was having issues earlier. He's a good kid. And I started to ask my first question. He starts to answer it. And all of a sudden he stops and kind of rolls his eyes. And I turn over my shoulder, and Ted, literally like a father, is pointing to the door like, "You got to go outside with this." I'm like, give me a freaking break.
What a loser.
Clown show.
Yeah, I did not know that was going on. So that's it. Does any of the culture stuff matter? Like the Club Med preseason, ping pong tables, any of this stuff?
I'll tell you what, I shouldn't be appalled at this, because I do realize that this is their job. I will say this, and I've said this before, Rip. I think fans take winning and losing far more personal than players do. For players, it's a job.
Yeah.
They're getting paid to do the job. They're trying to put their best foot forward in order to get more money to do their job. So that's the motivation for them. Winning is a byproduct, and nobody likes to lose. But again, at the end of the day, I mean, dude, if you'd have been in that locker room on Monday with the ping pong going on and the raucousness, you thought this was a 9-3 football team about to clinch a playoff berth. It was the damnedest thing I've ever seen.
Well, one thing you got to remember that people don't realize, because fans get, they're in turmoil when their team's not playing well and everything's the worst. But for a lot of these guys, have you ever had a job where the stakes weren't that high? There wasn't a lot of pressure. You kind of just went in, you hung out with your buddies, you kind of got your job done, you just went home and you just had a good time. That's a good job to work. People usually like working those jobs. You may not make the most money at them, but in the NFL, you're making millions to do that. So, I mean, yeah, they're living a less stressful life now that they're out of the playoff picture in a lot of ways. That's how it goes for NFL teams. It may suck, it may be frustrating, but at the end of the day, your day-to-day life isn't ruined by it.
Right.
One other little bit of news here from the Bengals. Veteran wide receiver Trenton Irwin was waived by the Bengals this week. He spent 6 years with the team, which actually was longer than it felt like, at least to me. I didn't realize he had been there that long. They did sign linebacker Shaka Hayward up from the practice squad. Trenton Irwin played in his 6 years. He played 41 games. He had 46 receptions, 601 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I was driving back from Akron last night. I asked the two people in the car with me to guess how many receptions and yards he had. And both of them missed the yardage by like over 400 yards. They thought he had about 200 or 300 yards. So
that's funny.
I don't know where I'm going with this. I just thought it was kind of interesting that they waived Trenton Irwin, and he had better stats than I originally thought.
Yeah, no, I mean, Trenton Irwin, you talk about a guy squeezing the absolute most out of a career. I mean, he did it tenfold. You're probably too young for this. You remember the movie Office Space?
No, yeah.
Remember Melvin that kept getting moved down the line and finally they put him in the basement?
Yes.
That feels like Trenton. Like they never told Trenton he was fired, so he just kept showing up like, yeah, I mean, he's still on the roster. I mean, yeah, okay, sure.
And what's funny about that is he had some type of quote. He got waived, by the way, but he had a quote in his goodbye to Cincinnati that was something like, when people no longer see you as you see yourself, it's time to leave. And it's like, okay, I guess so, buddy.
I got to give him this. He would, so after like a training camp practice, you go in, do the locker room stuff, and I would have to come out and do usually a TV hit. But about 45 minutes would have passed since the end of practice by that point. And who's still out there signing autographs every day? Trenton Irwin. Every day. He loved that.
And then as he'd turn and go back to the locker room, you'd hear the kids ask their mom, who was that?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears here to college basketball. Big college basketball week. Tonight is an unbelievable slate of games here on Wednesday as we're recording this. We've already had some big games locally. We'll start with Cincinnati because the Bearcats jumping up into the metrics. They're in like the top 5 of KenPom. They're up there in the net. They're ranked nationally, and then they play their first real test on the road, and they drop one at Villanova, 68-60. Jizzle James scored 19 points for the Bearcats. They only shot 38% from the field. They were 8 of 26 from three-point range, and they gave up 31 points to Villanova big man Eric Dixon. That was really their biggest issue in that game.
Well, they had 2 big issues. That certainly was one of them. So I'm going to ask you this, Rick. If you were the coach and Eric Dixon came in averaging about 25 points a game and really is their clear-cut main offensive threat, do you think there'd be any time you'd try to deny him the ball and or run a double team at him at the post? Do you think you'd ever try something like that? Or do you think you just guard him one-on-one and just hope he missed?
Well, so a lot of college coaches are into this do what we do mentality, right? It's like the other team adjusts to us. We always play the same way, and we make the other team adjust. And I do get that to some extent. I like that to some extent. But there are situations like this one where Villanova is not a very good team. They have one extremely good player. Just everything if you let him. I'm of the opinion in that situation, yeah, I would game plan for that a little bit. I would scout that more, and I would go away. Now, Grant, UC's defense, and they've been very good with their defense. They're gambling on the idea of we can guard you one-on-one because we don't want to leave shooters open on the perimeter and give up threes, which are a high percentage efficiency shot, and we don't want to be scrambling the whole game, giving you easy baskets at the rim or from three-point range. So that's why they make that gamble that they're just going to guard you one-on-one, so they're not scrambling, they're not in help position all the game. In this situation, though, I mean, again, Eric Dixon put 31 on. He needed a lot of shots to do it. But again, he was just putting so much stress on your defense by beating you consistently that you would think you just get the ball out of his hands at some point.
Yeah, and I say that talking about the defensive side of the things, where I thought they lost because their offense was so bad. I'm still trying to figure out what they do offensively. And I mean, there were stretches where Seamus didn't touch it. And it's like, can you run a set for him? I mean, it looks like it's 5 guys running around with no idea of what they want to do other than occasionally break you down one-on-one.
Yeah, switching on the perimeter seems to bog them down a lot. And that's, Villanova obviously does that well. Looking at their offense, they get nothing out of the front court. I mean, they can't throw the ball into their post players at all. And for some reason, they're still in there clogging it up a decent amount. I would get Assis Bandego moving more. I would get him out of the lane, off of the block, not have him sitting there as often as he is. And also to your point about Simas Lukosius, he had been shooting the lights out. He didn't shoot as well in this game, but I do think he has to still be a guy who attacks and does more than just spot up shooting for them, because there are going to be games where he doesn't shoot 75% from the outside, and they need him to maybe draw some fouls. They need him to get the offense going a little bit in other ways. He has to be able to provide that. And I don't think he did in this matchup. Jizzle James is really good.
Really good.
They need another guy or two to step up consistently for them on the offensive end, and not having Dan Skillings is
that's another part of it. Yeah, that's another part of it too. I mean, I didn't think it would show until you got the conference play, and maybe the Xavier game too. But I didn't think it would show till then. I thought you could squeak through this game even without that. But it was clear you needed another offensive weapon. But you also need to run some stuff. I literally am trying to figure out, if I was scouting them, what do they run? It looks like 5 guys running around like chickens with their heads chopped off.
Yeah, they are not a team that runs like a whole lot of good action, I wouldn't say. Now, it's almost at times it gets a little bit Mick-ish, where you'll run like a set play where, okay, this guy's coming off a staggered screen, coming up, getting the ball. There's sort of one action, and he's in his spot now. And if he gets a shot, great. But if not, then it seems like the play kind of dies.
Then what's next? Yeah, then what's next? Yeah, what's next? Right.
Yeah, they don't flow into something else much. So, I don't know. The one thing that's been interesting to watch, especially running a Xavier site, is the flows of the fan base, because all of a sudden Xavier loses to Michigan. They play ugly against South Carolina State, only win by 3. And it becomes, even the Xavier people at that point are like, oh no, the crosstown shootout is going to be brutal this year. UC fans are all excited as their metrics go up. And then UC drops this game, and now it's kind of flips again. And Xavier fans are all back on board of like, oh, you're going to lose the shootout once again to a bad Xavier team.
As I say, and UC fans are now going, yep, we're going to lose the shootout again.
You can see it coming. Yeah. UC will host Howard on Sunday at 2 p.m. in their next game. Kentucky lost 1 to Clemson last night on Tuesday. They lost 70-66. Otega Owe had 17 points and 7 rebounds for the Wildcats, but it wasn't enough as they shot just 7 of 27 from 3-point range, 26%. And that's something that we've been talking about since the start of the season. There are going to be those nights where this team does not knock down the 3. What happens to them in those situations? Can they keep finding some success offensively, or do they fall apart a bit? And I mean, they had some moments where they battled through, but ultimately, I don't think 66 points is going to get it done with the style they play.
No, I mean, defensively, again, 70 points should win games for this team. And listen, Andrew Carr didn't have a very good game, but I still think they should have gone through the post with him more often. And I think he needed to attack in the post more often. It felt like when he got any resistance at all as he tried to make a move or back down, he was like, I'll just turn around and shoot a fall away 7-footer here. No, man, you were backing down good enough. Get yourself under the rim and go score at the rim, for goodness sakes. And, through all that, I think they were down 1 or down 2. They ran a great hammer play set where they got a wide open 3 out of the corner and just missed it. And it was one of the ones where like, great call, great set, great execution, wide open shot, just missed it. But, you don't want it to come down to that. You want to be able to do something other than just, hope that you make threes on a given night. I think that's the only thing that's a little distressing is, you finally had that night, and you've had a couple of others a little similar, but against way lesser competition where you could score in transition. You could, score off the turnovers. You could score in the paint and at the rim. I just felt like there were times that play through Andrew Carr more in the post.
Yeah, how about Clemson and Victor Locken?
Victor Locken.
Gossiping people here. Yeah. A good start to their season early. I think they're...
And I will say, the guy with the crazy hair, and I can't think of his name right now, he had the goofy hair for Clemson. I love that kid, man. That dude was a ball of energy.
I don't know his name either, off the top of my head. Sorry. NKU loses to Akron 86-73. Trey Robinson goes for 30 points on 15 shots, and yet NKU loses by double digits on the road here. This is another one of those games, Skinny, where for stretches, NKU had great runs, played themselves back in the game, but they fell behind by 17 and 19 points multiple times.
You're climbing uphill. Yeah, you're climbing uphill. I will say the first thing I did last night after I saw the score was scroll right to the box score. And that when I saw what Trey Robinson's line was, I went, oh, and you lost by that?
He had 23 points on 8 of 9 shooting in the first half.
Wow.
Now, granted, he threw in like 2 buzzer beater 3-pointers at the end of the box, but still had 23 points, and those 3-pointers still counted for NKU score. And yeah, they've just been hitting some weird patches throughout these games. And every coach will say this, like, we've got to put 40 full minutes together, but never has that cliche rang more true for a team than this NKU one right now. Because even go back to the Florida State game where they had opportunities in that one. They had Florida State on the ropes at times and had some moments to get back into it. And it's like they can't seem to play consistently well for 40 minutes. And part of that is because they're not very deep right now. There's times where they're subbing and guys are coming in and they're having a major drop off. And sometimes those are the starters that are providing the major drop off too. They're getting a lift from the bench. So they've just got to get more consistent play out of more than just Trey Robinson and Sam Vincent.
By the way, I'm sure you've looked this up. I didn't look it up till last night, and I saw he scored double-digit points. Marquez Warwick had 12 for Missouri. He's averaging like 8 or 9 a game for them. I think he's doing quite well.
Yeah, starting to pick it up more. It seemed like earlier in the season he wasn't even playing as much, and as they've gotten more into their schedule, I think they're seeing the value of having a guy that can knock down shots like him.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, and then Xavier struggled again against SC State. We mentioned that they won that one 71-68. I believe I have the score right that time.
That sounds right.
Check me on that. Make sure I'm not giving Xavier any extra points. But they will play at TCU on Thursday night, and I think this is a fun and interesting matchup because TCU's struggling. They've already dropped 3 games, but they are a 80-ish level team in KenPom. It's a home game for them. They've got a young team, honestly, a team that's still developing and finding their way, and I think they're not going to be very good in the Big 12 this year, but they are going to get better as the season goes. And most importantly, the thing that they do best right now is they defend and put pressure on you on the perimeter. They're ranked 32nd in defensive efficiency, and they do a really good job of being tough on the ball, switching screens. And that's exactly what Michigan and South Carolina State did to the Xavier team. They took them out of their flow. They didn't let them reverse the ball through the top of the key. They didn't let them get open 3-pointers. And Xavier didn't really have an answer for how to beat that. So I think this is going to be another very similar test for them on Thursday night on the road. All right. That's all we got for college basketball. That, like I said, Xavier will play Thursday night. That's the next big game. And we got some more good games coming up this weekend, but a huge slate of games tonight on Wednesday. If you're listening to this on the day we're recording this.
Bunch of ranked versus ranked.
Yeah. Check out that slate of games. College football, Skinny. We've got the Fire the Coaches edition of college football right now. The regular season is over.
Where do we start?
Local teams are playing in conference championships. So the question is, out of Ryan Day, Scott Satterfield, and Mark Stoops, who deserves to be fired the most? Because all their fan bases have them all fired right now.
I would go Scott Satterfield because it was never a good hire to begin with, in my opinion. But it's not going to happen, as we know, right? It's not going to happen. So I'm going that route with it. I get the Ryan Day angst. I clearly do. But here's the crazy part to this. And there are some Ohio State fans that may actually believe this. I mean, he still has a legit chance to lead that team to a national championship. Will that wipe out the loss to Michigan or not?
Hell yes.
I don't think it does for some people.
If they make a national championship or if they win a national
championship? No, if they win a national championship. I don't know if that does for some people. I really don't.
Hire a coach after one national championship?
No, I don't think they'd I'm not saying the fan base.
Well, the fans would still want him gone even if they want a national championship. Yes. There are some. I think those are the real crazy extremists. I think most Ohio State fans, and I do think most of them have flipped now. It's probably 80% or more think Ryan Day should no longer be the coach.
Yeah.
But if they won a national championship, I think 78% of those 80 would be back on board.
And I think you'd agree. They still have a very legit shot. You've lost 2 close games. One you shouldn't have lost to your rival, but you've lost 2 close games, and maybe hopefully you've learned from it. I don't think he's learned from having his ass so tight he can't even breathe when he faces Michigan.
But I think that's a Michigan problem.
More than it is that
and every other game problem. I agree. He is mentally worked up over the Michigan. I mean, quite honestly, I think it is very similar to the Mick Cronin crosstown shootout situation. I think it's very out for that game.
I think it's very much Marvin Lewis with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, we've seen this before, and I think that's a real thing that exists. I think you start doing weird things to try to motivate your team, and they sense that you're acting different. And then I think when you get into calling plays, you get tight in those situations. We saw that with Ryan Day in this game. The play calling was atrocious.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was, Chip Kelly is the play caller, as we know.
Right.
sometimes coaches will call up to say, hey, I need us to be conservative here. Don't screw this up. It honestly felt like if this was on Chip Kelly, then he should take the blame. But it almost looked like after they got that interception deep in Michigan territory, right? So Lion Day was saying, just get me a field goal and we're good.
Yep.
And they did, and then he missed. That's why you don't play for the field goal. You had a chance to seize that game right then and there, find Jeremiah Smith, find Emeka Ibuka, and let's be done with it.
Chip Kelly has to be one of the more disappointing parts of this season for Ohio State fans, right? Because I think when the
offensive line has not helped some of this either,
without a doubt. But you're still talking about some of the most talented players in all of college football. So it's like Ohio State's offensive line isn't as good as it was supposed to be. Great. It still should be pretty damn good and pretty damn serviceable at this level.
Well, the other part, too, that screamed to me was they completely lost any trust in Will Howard with the game on the line, right? But dude, we're not letting you throw a bad interception here. We are going to run this third down draw because we don't trust you. Well, that's a bad place to be when you head into the college football playoff because you're going to have to trust him for 3 games.
Skinny, I would argue they've never had trust in Will Howard. Going back to the Oregon game, think about the lack of downfield plays. We've been talking about that all season. For a team that has a Jeremiah Smith and a Emeka Ibuka, the running backs that they have, I mean, they have an embarrassment of riches in terms of their playmakers, and they get very few downfield explosive plays for this offense. So, I mean, if I'm an Ohio State fan, when they signed Chip Kelly, that felt like it was almost better than getting a new head coach at that time. It was like, man, you've really got an innovative guy who's at the top of the game in terms of calling plays, and he's really just going to be focused on this now and no longer being a head coach and overseeing an entire program. He's just going to be so creative and dialed in on calling the plays. And we really haven't seen a bump from their offense or their play calling or the ingenuity of their offense at any point this season from last year.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Day is 66-10 overall while we're on the subject.
So good. I mean, that's so good in theory.
He's won so many games. He still has the 4th best odds of winning this year's national championship game. And all the hand-wringing, though, from the fan base and the comments that are being made, the calls they're getting from donors, it did force OSU athletic director Ross Bjork to make a comment backing Ryan Day, saying, our full focus right now is on the college football playoff and making a strong run. We have a ton to play for. We have a great team made up of talented players and great young men. Coach Day does a great job leading our program. He's our coach. Are you concerned at all that he's getting the vote of confidence from the athletic director right now?
I also, though, wonder if maybe he's made up his mind that no matter how the college football playoff goes out, I'm done. I'm going somewhere else. The pressure cooker's too much for me. I mean, you can clearly see it.
It didn't look like he was having a lot of fun after that game, that's for sure.
Nope.
That would be interesting to see him just walk away from it all. Do you think you would go coach another college team in that scenario? Or are you saying maybe go be a coordinator in the NFL or something?
Go be a head coach in the NFL. Maybe the Bears.
I don't think any NFL team is hiring Ryan Day at this point. But
maybe not.
They fell to number 6 in the college football playoff rankings, but that puts them as the 8th seed in the new projected bracket. So currently they'd be slotted to play a home game against number 9 Tennessee with number 1 Oregon waiting in the quarterfinals, assuming Oregon wins the Big Ten championship. That's an interesting draw all of a sudden for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, because we were talking about all along, they were in the 5-12 game getting ready to play the week 4 seed, whoever the 4 seed. Now the 4 seed's what? I think Boise, right? In the bracket. So,
and how about the 5 seed being Arizona State?
I mean,
right now.
Their draw is very favorable.
Looking at this new bracket, there are definitely some flaws with it, but it makes a really intriguing.
All right, so here's my question for you. Because obviously Miami people are ticked off because they're not in. Alabama or Miami? Which one should it be?
I'm okay with Alabama, quite honestly.
Because I would ask you, I always use this test, right? Of put them on a neutral field. What's the betting line?
Well, that, and also I believe Alabama was 2-1 against teams in the playoff field.
Yeah.
And Miami's 0-1.
Right.
So, to me, that's pretty simple. It's like what you did against teams ranked outside the top 15 of the country doesn't matter a whole lot. Yes, you have to win enough of those games to have a record that's deserving of being in the conversation. But once you're in the conversation, then I don't really care what you did against teams that aren't ranked and aren't a part of this playoff discussion. And if you have 2 wins over those teams and another team has 0, it's a pretty easy decision at that point. I mean, when it came down to it, I thought we were going to have some really difficult conversations. But if Miami and Ole Miss are the first 2 teams out, I don't really have an argument for either of those teams getting in over somebody else, to be quite honest.
Let's go back to the coaching discussion. So how does this become salvageable for either Kentucky or Cincinnati with their current head coaching situations? Because it doesn't feel salvageable at all.
Well, I would think Scott Satterfield's probably got more time left, right? I mean, they can't get rid of him yet.
No, I agree. Because I don't think they're going to pay that buyout, but it just doesn't fit. I mean, 2 seasons have gone this way. The end of his Louisville thing, it wasn't like there's a lot of cachet built up for this cat.
I would say good luck fundraising for NIL next year, and good luck selling your tickets next year, because you've got a lame duck season ahead for as long as it takes for you to either get rid of Scott Satterfield at this point or for him to have a miraculous turnaround that, quite frankly, I just don't know that he or maybe even anyone is capable of doing in the Big 12 era for Cincinnati.
Yeah, it just feels like it's such a lose-lose, and the same for Kentucky at the moment. It feels like they're heading into the abyss of the bottom of a very tough league that's going to be hard to dig out of.
But what's even more upsetting about the Kentucky situation is Stoops already brought them back from that. Like, he had built up so much goodwill over the last decade with what he had done at Kentucky, and now it's like all of that's out the window and then some. And the weird thing about it is, before this season even happened, he got into all that weird stuff last year where he's like calling out the fan base and saying he needs more NIL money and
flirting with Texas A&M.
Yeah, he built up this sort of weird animosity between him and some of the fan base and some of the admin at Kentucky, to where it's like, man, at this point, there's almost no goodwill left for Mark Stoops, and you would think it would be kind of an easy decision to move on from it.
Except it's $40-some-odd million a buyout.
What do you think they're going to do with that? Because
I think he stays. They actually, it sounded like today they salvaged their recruiting class and actually got a 4-star to flip from Wisconsin or from Minnesota to them. I think they lost a couple of guys early on, but I think they ended up salvaging the recruiting class, and maybe that's the first step forward.
Does this become a one last year situation for Mark Stoops?
Maybe for both, right? Maybe for Kentucky's thoughts about him, and maybe for his thoughts about trying to dig out from under this. Listen, he's a prideful guy like everybody is. I'm sure he feels like, hey, in fact, he even said, he goes, my butt's going to be at work tomorrow. I'm coming back to do this, whether you like it or not. I kind of admire that, but at some point, that's just hollow talk. I mean, if you have another year like this, do you really want to run back again?
Well, yeah, and what was it, a year or 2 ago? I mean, it wasn't long ago that he was getting legitimate job offers from other moves that seemed somewhat lateral at the time.
Yeah.
But we always said, like, maybe he'll look at it and just say, I've done all I can here at Kentucky. It's going to get worse before it gets any better than it is right now. Maybe I should just move on and get out while the getting's good. And he didn't do that. And now it's gone on too long to where I wonder how hot of a name he would even be if other jobs opened up at this point.
It's a legit point.
The Scott Satterfield thing, just to wrap that up, what do you think Cincinnati does now? Because they are 2 years into this. It was a failed hire from the start. Like I said, it feels like a lame duck season coming up here. Do you think there's almost no chance they move on before next year, right?
Yeah, I say he's got at least one more year. At that point, the buyout will have to be, you'll have to do it. You can't ask your fan base to go through this for a 4th year. There's no way. For a 3rd year, you just have to say, listen, guys, here's what it is. That's what the buyout is. You guys know what the buyout is. We can't afford to pay the buyout. We're not willing to pay the buyout. We're going to run it back one more time, but I don't think it's tenable for him either.
All right. That wraps up college football. Move on to our pick'em. You were 3-5 last week. I was 4-4, so that brings you to 52-42. I am 46-48. Our best bets, I hit with Indiana at -29.5. They won 66-0.
They put the smack down.
And you did not hit. You had Wisconsin +1?
No, I had Ohio State. Oh, no, I did have Wisconsin +1. I was going to go Ohio State, right? I did have Wisconsin +1. What was it? It's one. And you talk about landing. You talk about a guy who's probably got one more year left.
Luke Fickell, not a great spot. That's the other thing. UC fans are like, it'd be great to have Luke Fickell. But Luke Fickell might have known what was coming in the Big 12 for Cincinnati, because he got out and moved to a really difficult job situation, and it's not going well for him either.
No, it's not.
All right, we only have one game this week.
Let's do it.
Bengals game at Dallas, Sunday Night Football. Bengals are a 5.5-point favorite, believe it or not.
Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football.
There you go. It's okay.
Simpsons game.
Yes. So I saw this line a couple of days ago.
And 49.5 is the total.
Wow. Bengals are 6-point favorite. I think it shows you that the odds makers still believe this is a good team with a bad record, right? But
well, I mean, Joe Burrow's playing so well.
yeah, I can't take them to cover that number. I'll go Dallas because they've gotten a little bit of a roll here. They got some confidence. I'll go Dallas 27, Bengals 26.
All right, so Cowboys by 1, they get the cover, and that is definitely over the total of 49.5. So
Evan McPherson with a missed extra point is the difference.
Cowboys and the over. I like the over too. Part of this is I need some separation from you if I'm going to come back in this pick'em, and part of this is this seems like the most Bengals thing ever right now. It's just like the offense is playing well enough to be in these games and win them. Dallas kind of stinks. So the second that the Bengals are all but eliminated, they'll go out and get a win on the road against Dallas. So Bengals 34, Dallas 28, Bengals in the over for me. What best bet do you have for us this week, Skinny?
I'm going to the SEC championship game, and I'm going all in on Georgia running the table and winning the national championship. Been there, done that. I know the Georgia Tech win was shaky, but it was also a hell of a comeback, and it breathed new life into them, in my opinion. I'm taking Georgia over. Texas's offense has wobbled a bit here down the stretch. Beat Texas A&M 17-7. Really didn't look great against Kentucky, other than the one last drive, really, where they pushed Kentucky around. I think Georgia rolls by double digits.
Do you want the points at -105 plus 2.5? Do you want the money line at plus 116, or are you like taking that up and making Georgia the favorite here, doing an alternate line?
No, I'm gonna just take Georgia the points.
Okay, Georgia plus 2.5 at -105 is Skinny's best bet of the week. I am going to go with Boise State -3.5 in their championship game. They beat UNLV by 5 at UNLV earlier this season. This game will be at home for Boise State. I like their chances there to cover the 3.5. All right, just a couple of Ask Skinny Anything questions. Do you have a list from last week that you wanted to rank?
I do. I've got it ranked. I'm going to save it for one more week only because I don't have my computer turned on at the moment.
Okay,
it's on
deal. And then I got a couple more questions here of mine. Rob Manfred floated the idea of MLB implementing a golden at-bat rule. It's something that the Savannah Bananas did before last year, if it gives you any idea of how seriously you should be taking this. The rule allowed teams to pinch hit any hitter at any time of the game. Each team can only use the golden batter once. So the idea being here, you come down, end of game situation, bases loaded. Instead of having your 8-hole hitter up, you could just put your cleanup batter or whoever your best hitter is up in that situation. Skinny, your thoughts on that rule?
Yeah, you can see I'm shaking my. What are we doing here? We're going to take a gimmick from the Savannah Bananas and put it in Major League Baseball. Are you kidding me? Are you
just shorten the season, Rob? Just shorten the season. We don't need Savannah Banana rules or Ghost Runners. We just need a shorter season.
I mean, you already have teams that are at a disadvantage because of the financial disadvantages from some teams to others, and suddenly you're going to let that team that has 3 or 4 superstars and maybe 2 guys are protecting the bottom of the order, saving their ass. No, it's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard.
Also, what are you going to do if your best hitter is the last guy due up?
Right.
He strikes out, then do you just keep him at the plate? You got to throw him 3 more strikes, or it's how it works?
That's a great clip. Please don't do this. I've come around to the Ghost Runner thing. I don't really like it a whole lot, but I've come around to that a little bit for the extra innings, just to save some arms. But I don't even really like that. But I've come around a little. This is the dumbest thing I ever heard floated.
Would you come around on this, perhaps?
No, this is never, absolutely never, ever, never, ever.
I just don't understand. Well, to me, this is
never
going to happen, and this is trying to get attention.
Yeah, I like the fact that one league had a DH at one point and one league didn't. That kind of differentiated. I like when the leagues didn't play each other.
I would be fine with going back to that. Well, you brought up the idea of making it more of a weekend sport, right? Just playing like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to shorten the season. I love that idea. That's the best innovation I've heard for baseball in a long time. I wish they'd consider a way to shorten the season. I do not care about the golden at-bat rule. What is your weird skill or ability that you'd be Olympic level good at, Skinny?
I can pick up anything off the floor with my toes and reach it up and just pluck it out with my hand.
For instance, when would you use this?
Like if I was walking around the house barefooted and maybe was writing something with a pen and the pen fell, I can just reach down with my toes, pick it up, and put it in my hand.
Could you imagine the sickos that would be watching that Olympic event? People with foot fetishes that would be looking for toe jam and all that. Olympic athletes. That would be sickening. I could, if you, my skill is detecting subtle differences in Coke Zero?
Really?
If you lined up Fountain Coke from UDF on the AA and Wilder, and the Thorntons on the AA and Wilder, and the Thorntons on Dixie Highway by Dixie High School, I could tell you where all three of them came from.
Wow, that's impressive.
And any fast food joint too.
So I did that. I did that with beer in Chicago once, where I had a buddy of mine that was a sales rep for Pabst and Old Style, and we made our trip to Chicago. And I had gotten to the point because I drank it for him. He's such a good guy. He's still a friend. I drank Old Style for most of the day. I'm like, I can't do anymore. I said, I love you and I love your beer. And I appreciate you buying. I got to get me a Bud Light. I got to do something different. He goes, you can't tell the difference. I said, I can tell the difference between Bud Light, Coors Light, your beer,
Miller.
and Miller Light. I said, he goes, no, you can't. I said, do me a favor. I said, you know the guy running the bar. I'll pay for it. He goes, no, I'll pay for it. He goes, and I'll give you $20 if you can do it. So he sat him down. I just went Coors Light, Bud Light, Miller Light, and Old Style. So there's the Old Style. He goes, damn. I go, I can taste the difference. I can't drink Coors Light or Miller Light. I can't. I hate them.
Yeah, with light beers, I think it's actually easy to tell the difference. People say that, but I think it's very easy so between them. So yeah, the Coke Zero, like people will always be like, what do you mean they have a can there? They have a bottle of Coke Zero at that place. Why didn't you get that? And I'm like, oh, I don't touch cans or bottles. I drink fountain drink. And not only that, I only drink fountains from certain locations. Like it's the fountains I don't like. That's how no. Yeah. Also, another Ask Skinny. This. All right, get ready for this. You are wearing pants and lie down for a nap in your bed. You then poop yourself while sleeping.
I mean,
Would you describe this as pooping your pants or pooping the bed?
Oh, if it stays in your pants, you pooped your pants. If it's somehow got some real bad complosion out of it, then you may wind up pooping the bed too. Correct?
Yeah. If it's smeared in the sheets at all, then it's pooping the bed.
That's correct. No, I would call it as long as it stayed in your pants, pooping your pants.
I think that's right. Although, I mean, if someone ever did poop in the bed and you knew about that, you would have to use the term, well, they blanked the bed.
Yes, no question.
Well, you have to say that about a friend who did this. But at the same time,
and
technically speaking, I would say poop their pants.
I was just say if it did get into the sheets and whatnot, I wouldn't even wash the sheets. They just been burnt. Yeah,
exactly. Or throw away the bed.
Yeah, or throw away the bed maybe if it leaked all the way through.
Mattress. You're never getting it. It's like shoes. Once you've stepped in dog poop, throw away out poop shoes. You slit your poop in your bed. It's always a poop bed.
That's a very good point. I have one final take for you, Rick.
Hell yeah.
So here's what I think should take place with those teams that plant flags in other people's stadiums.
Oh, yes. I want to hear this. Okay.
It is an automatic forfeit on the spot. The officials come back out and go, you know what? We've got this rule in place. That's a forfeit. All that hard work you just put in, that's a forfeit. That'll knock it. That's all you have to do. It will never happen in another stadium again. It's not hard.
I don't really, the flag thing, I don't understand. I don't really have an issue with it.
I just think it's silly.
It is silly, but it's also silly that people go out and defend that and want to start fights over it. And if that's what we're going to do, I kind of just, it's kind of like
what about a rooster crapping on your logo?
Survival of the fittest situation, right? It's like, just let the idiots kill each other out there on the field. Shoot them all.
I'm too logical for this, I guess. I don't like, I'm not a nonsense guy. I don't like, that's nonsensical to me.
Multiple teams in the same day over flag planting at midfield is nonsensical. I will definitely allow you that. That is 100% the case.
So to that point, it goes back to my whole rushing the court. Like last night at Clemson, they rushed the court. I don't know why you rushed the court. I mean, it is Kentucky, but it isn't like it's some Kentucky team of superstar, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Missile history isn't great.
I'm just telling you, you want to end this the second they come on the floor. It's a forfeit. That's it. All the work that your guys just put in, done, forfeit. What does that serve? What's the point?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. I think your rule would work. I don't think that's going to happen.
I like the fact they fined Michigan and Ohio State $100,000. You know what that's like to them? That's me going down to the dryer in a minute to hang up my clothes and I find a dime or a quarter and go, oh, cool, dime and a quarter. That's all. That's a drop in the bucket.
That's a rounding error for Chipotle to their lunch throughout the year. I mean, and even if that happened.
100,000, really? I think they've got that money lying around somewhere.
It was a little insane that the Michigan players got maced. That was a while.
I think Pat Forty got maced as well. I heard that. It was on the field. He was on the field. I think he got maced too.
I didn't listen to his podcast this week.
I didn't either, but I saw that or heard that from somebody.
Oh my God, I got to find out if that's real. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, all right. That's all we got.
That's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening and watching on YouTube. If you all, or whatever podcast provider you go to. For Rick Brory, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition presented by Blake, the Attorney Mason.